I share with you a reading from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 8, beginning at verse 31. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said this all quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life?" This is the gospel of our Savior Christ. Thanks be to God. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the region from which my great-great-great-grandmother came in around the 1840 area. My great-great-grandmother, Lydia McClellan, came to Peel County in Ontario from Baileyborough in County Cavan with her husband, Joseph Clifton. And the church that they attended in County Cavan, a Presbyterian church, has an unusual architectural feature. The area around Baileyborough in the late 18th century was home to a group called the United Irishmen. And these were Irish Protestants who were tired of English rule. They wanted to be free of the British monarchy, and their Catholic neighbors were surprised when they joined them in rebellion against the crown. The pastor of the Presbyterian church in Baileyborough would bring a broadsword into the pulpit every Sunday, and in his anti-monarchical fervor, he would slam the great blade on his pulpit repeatedly while he preached, which must have kept everyone's attention. So the pulpit of the Presbyterian church in Baileyborough is hacked and marked by the preacher's great sword. So there is an election coming soon. And the story of the sword-marked pulpit came to mind as election day nears for us. In fact, we pass by an early election poll in the other end of our church building as we come to the sanctuary today. And maybe it's the intensity and passion of the Presbyterian preacher from Baileyborough that seems familiar, almost contemporary. In Canada, in the United States, in much of the world, things are pretty heated and polarized and divided, tribal even. There seems like there's quite a bit of anger out there, politically outrageous. Memes flood social media, often filled with misinformation. Social media algorithms favor content that create emotional reactions like anger and fear, stoking the fires of discontent to drive up views and make money for advertising. Candidates of all parties speak of how their election signs are now torn down at unprecedented rates. On the way to Rideau Park this morning, I passed a whole series of election signs marked with offensive graffiti. Journalists are struck by stones hurled at a candidate in anger. And it's not just our political leaders that we don't care for. But more and more, we're starting to also dislike each other, go into camps and factions and groups. People not just disliking political ideas that they don't agree with, but disliking the people who hold those ideas. And so much of our political conversation descends into ad hominem attacks on party leaders, not so much a discussion of policies and platforms. And beyond politics, we're also divided into groups on so many issues, like the pandemic, masks, lockdowns, vaccinations. All these things have become things that divide us at a time when we really need to pull together. In the southern United States, doctors vaccinate people secretly, discreetly, so family and friends don't know that you're vaccinated, so you're not seen as betraying the tribe that you belong to. George Orwell, in an essay he wrote at the end of the Second World War, spoke of the factionalism of his time as the habit of identifying oneself with a single nation or unit, placing that beyond good and evil. And the abiding purpose of every group member is to secure more power, more prestige, not for himself, but for the nation or other unit in which he has chosen to sink his own individuality. And that seems very contemporary too. Which brings us to the gospel for today. Jesus is with his friends by the springs of Caesarea Philippi. And Caesarea Philippi was the seat of Roman power in the far north of Israel. And Jesus speaks of a cross in a place where the empire's power was all around them visible. Jesus says, take up the cross in a place where the cross was clearly an instrument of imperial power. Crucifixion was a form of imperial execution. And Jesus says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. First of all, when we hear these words of Jesus, it's important to recognize that this is an invitation Jesus extends, not an imposition he places on anyone. Any cross we carry is one we decide to pick up. It's not imposed on us. There are burdens in our lives which come upon us, but those are not our crosses unless we choose to take them up as a cross. And when Jesus is inviting us to pick up a cross, it's not an invitation so much for an individual to do something. It's more of an invitation to join a group. He's inviting us to join a community, to take on an identity, to choose a certain group of companions on the road of life. He's inviting us to join his tribe, to be part of his faction. The people of Jesus' time were what anthropologists call dyadic in nature. They were other-oriented people. We weren't so much individuals in Jesus' time as we were part of a group. Our identity came from who we belonged to, who we associated with, who we were connected to. So things like family or place of origin or faith group or ethnicity, these were the things that defined you, not something innate to yourself. And Jesus, in inviting us to take up a cross, is inviting us to choose a group, to join with Jesus in identifying with those who bear crosses. The cross was an instrument of power used by Rome only on non-citizens. A cross was carried by the outsider, someone outside the dominant tribe. The act of carrying a cross was a public display of guilt and shame, a source of ridicule and scorn. And in saying he would take up a cross, Jesus was telling his disciples whose side he was on. Jesus is with those seen as outsiders, and Jesus walked in solidarity with people who do not belong in your group. Jesus was with the scorned and the ridiculed, and he invites his followers to be with them too. Joining Jesus' tribe of the cross takes you beyond your tribe, your faction, your party. Jesus says, if you would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. These are words of invitation into a broad and compassionate community. In 1958, while on a walk in Louisville, Kentucky, the mystic Thomas Merton had a vision and he recorded it. Yesterday in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. Everyone shines like the sun. Take up your cross and follow me. Know that they are mine and I theirs. A feeling of connectedness beyond party or group or faction. A feeling of being in a transcendent tribe that goes beyond our current allegiances. This has huge implications on how we live and treat each other. In his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, Canadian psychologist and Harvard professor Steven Pinker argues that the world is becoming less violent, more humane, and one of the primary reasons he lists for this movement is the human rights movement. When people of another race or language or ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender identity or ability or faith or political leaning, when people like that are seen fully as human beings, equal before the law, equal to ourselves, when divisions are erased in this way and tribal identities are set aside, we treat each other more kindly, more gently. When we see we are connected, good things result. So as we go to the polls as a nation, and beyond going to the polls, might we remember that we are members of Jesus' compassionate, cross-bearing tribe. Above all other allegiances, we belong to Jesus. We are followers in the way of Jesus, who embodied and lived compassion and grace towards all. Can we see that no matter how we might vote, that Justin Trudeau, Erin O'Toole, Jagmeet Singh, Maxime Bernier, Annamie Paul, all the candidates from all parties, whatever their perceived flaws, whatever their positions, they are beloved of God, and we are connected. And the people who we disagree with politically and otherwise, they are God's beloved too. So, no broadsword in the pulpit today. But as we go to the polls in coming days, might we strive to see our connectedness? Might we take up the cross and follow in the way of Jesus, and see that we are part of a transcendent tribe of compassion and love. May it be so.